All right, fellas, over the last couple of days, we have seen the official kickoff of the Canelo Alvarez versus Terence Crawford promotion, with the two fighters embarking on a full press tour that has included multiple press conferences and a series of headline-grabbing moments that have set the stage for what is shaping up to be one of the most talked-about events in recent boxing history. And over the past week alone, there have been controversial dinners, huge media turnouts, Dana White's grand introduction, and even a bit of a scuffle between the fighters. So it feels like the right time to step back and really unpack everything that has been happening so far, because this fight, for all its hype and spectacle, is already proving to be far more than just another boxing match. The Saudis, who have been gradually ramping up their investment in major combat sports over the past few years, see this as their magnum opus, the crown jewel of their boxing experiment, and for the first time they have a fight that looks set to truly crack the American market in a way that none of their previous offerings have. And with Netflix taking the broadcast rights, the fight will have an unmatched global reach, meaning this is not only about sports but also about global branding and showcasing Saudi Arabia on one of the biggest stages possible. It's clear from how they are approaching this that they intend to pull out all the stops, and frankly they have to, because this is exactly the kind of event their long-term strategy has been aiming to create. An occasion that captures the attention of fans around the world while serving as a showpiece for everything they want their sports portfolio to represent. But for all of its grandeur and potential, the fight itself is in some ways an odd one. Canelo versus Crawford is more of a fantasy match than something most people expected to see in reality, the kind of hypothetical bout fans debate online, but rarely get in real life, and on paper it doesn't make the most sense in terms of weight, age, and career trajectory. Yet here we are, with it actually happening. One of the problems early on in the promotion was the somewhat clumsy way it was rolled out, with the fight seemingly being announced multiple times, which dulled the initial excitement. And during the first stretch of media appearances, the two fighters were a little too friendly with one another, to the point where they were photographed sharing a family-style dinner with Turki al-Sheikh. And while I agree with the idea that fighters don't have to genuinely hate each other to sell a fight, that image added to the feeling that this was more of a showcase or exhibition, rather than a bitter, high-stakes rivalry. Imagine if Mayweather and Pacquiao had done that before their fight. Do you think it would have built hype or killed it? Or if Khabib and Conor had sat down for a relaxed meal together before UFC 229? It just wouldn't have made sense from a promotional standpoint, and while plenty of people defended Canelo and Crawford for doing it, to me it felt like a mistake, especially for a fight that needs to capture the mainstream imagination. The good news for them is that boxing fans have notoriously short memories, and by the time of the first big rivalry presser, it seemed like the fighters and their teams realized they needed to inject some tension into the proceedings, which is exactly what happened as the tone began to shift, culminating in a minor scuffle at the most recent press conference. You could see it in their faces, the realization that this is real, that the talk is over and the fight is actually going to happen, and from that point forward, I expect the rivalry to be much more visible. The real question going forward is how Crawford will handle this kind of pressure. Because while he has been in big fights before, nothing in his career has matched the scale of this spectacle. Canelo has lived in this kind of spotlight for years, but for Crawford, this is uncharted territory. And while he looks like he's been able to put on the extra weight, we don't know yet if he can bring the same strengths he had at lighter divisions into a heavier weight class, nor do we know how he'll deal with the mental strain of such an enormous promotion. This is bigger than Spence Crawford, bigger than Brooke Crawford. It's on an entirely different level. And the only way we'll get those answers is when the fight actually happens. One of the more irritating storylines that has cropped up repeatedly during the press events is the idea that Crawford will run from Canelo, with both journalists and even the hosts of the event asking him variations of this question over and over. And to be blunt, it's nonsense. Crawford is not a runner. He has 31 knockouts on his record. And before his last fight, he was on an 11 KO streak against notable names like Spence, Porter, and Brooke. This isn't Devin Haney we're talking about, and the fact that such a talking point has gained traction says more about the shallow understanding some people have of boxing than it does about Crawford's style. What frustrates me is that while I expect this kind of thing from clout-chasing YouTubers who don't really know the sport, hearing it from people like Dana White or mainstream journalists is disappointing, because they should know better. Running is just a lazy, misused buzzword that gets tossed around without much thought. And in Crawford's case, it's completely off base. So hopefully that's the last time it comes up in any serious way. That aside, the second press conference was notable for another reason. It was the first time we've seen Dana White directly involved in one of these big Saudi boxing promotions. While there's been a lot of fair criticism about his role, given that he's not really functioning as a traditional boxing promoter but more as a recognizable face, you can't deny that he's good at running press conferences, keeping them organized and maintaining control of the room in a way that many boxing promoters struggle with. He has a presence that commands attention, and whether or not you like him, he makes for compelling viewing in this setting. I'm still skeptical about what his long-term role in boxing might be. Running a full boxing league under TKO would be a very different conversation. But as far as being a hype man or the figurehead for certain events, I think the Saudis could do a lot worse. Another curious aspect of this promotion has been the way it's been marketed through UFC and WWE channels, which makes sense from a business standpoint since they're all under the TKO umbrella, but still feels strange as a boxing fan. It's unusual to see a major boxing match advertised so heavily in UFC spaces, but perhaps that's part of a broader plan. Turki Al-Sheikh has talked about building a long-term relationship with Netflix, and if TKO is involved at a deeper level in the future, then we might see more crossover like this. All that aside, the more this promotion unfolds, the more I find myself getting drawn in despite my initial skepticism. Yes, there are still big questions about the weight difference, about the fighters' ages, about whether the matchup will actually deliver in the ring, but it's hard to deny that the event itself is shaping up to be a major moment for boxing. In some ways, it feels like the fight will be bigger than the fight itself, if that makes sense. It's a celebration of the sport, a rare example of a high-profile bout that isn't hidden behind a traditional pay-per-view wall, and that's something we haven't really seen in at least 50 years. If the promotion goes smoothly and the fight lives up to even part of its potential, it could be a huge step forward for boxing in terms of mainstream relevance and accessibility. The sport has been in desperate need of big moments that draw in casual fans without alienating the hardcore base, and this could be exactly that if everything clicks. So while I started out doubtful, I'm now cautiously optimistic, and I'll be watching closely as the build-up continues to see whether they can keep this momentum going right through to fight night.